I'm Steve Revill.
Can you get a bit nearer your mouth?
Sorry?
That's better.
Is that better?
I think so.
Okay. I'm Steve Revill from RISC OS Open, and this could be a very short presentation because we've been so hard working on the release of RISC OS for the Raspberry Pi that I've not actually prepared anything at all. However, I will talk to you a little bit about what this release is, why I think it's important, and what we think the next steps are beyond that. So first of all, about a year ago at this show we demonstrated RISC OS running on the Raspberry Pi, I think for the first time. It was quite flaky. It was primarily the work of a guy called Adrian Lees, who works at Broadcom, and he had access to early Raspberry Pi hardware, and he was in a unique position to try and port RISC OS to it. That port had all kinds of little issues and niggles, like the mouse pointer not working properly and things like that. But we immediately, as soon as we heard about it, we thought this is a brilliant opportunity to get RISC OS out to a broader public than currently have access to it. So you can buy some hardware for £30–40 and get RISC OS for free, and you've got a complete working RISC OS system, which previously was just a pipe dream. You could never have done that for the price that we're talking about. So the opportunity there is enormous to attract users and developers. So what we wanted to do was build a version of RISC OS that we felt was quite stable and reasonably well documented, so they had good welcome pages and was aimed at people who've never used the operating system before. And so over the last, I don't know, 2–3 months, we've been working pretty much flat out in our spare time to produce something which was finally rolled out yesterday afternoon, and we've called it RISC OS Pi, rather imaginatively. It's basically it's a 2 GB SD card image, so once you've bought a little SD card you can download this image from the Raspberry Pi Foundation website, program it on your SD card, plug it into this Raspberry Pi device, and off you go. You've got a fully working system. There is also a pack of software that we're selling on our stand called the NutPi. I'll just do a quick plug. It's £600 worth of RISC OS commercial software, but I think it adds a lot of useful features like email clients, word processors, and graphics packages. All the things that we come to expect for free almost with operating systems like Linux. But RISC OS really, as it stands, you can't get most of those things for free anymore. So one of the things I want to talk about is where we want to go next, because what we've done up to now is just, I think, enabling RISC OS to attract new people in, but the next big step, I think, is to have RISC OS combined with Linux on a single image. And this is something we're working hard to make sure happens, hopefully in the next few weeks. You'll be able to get hold of a single image off the Raspberry Pi site, which will include RISC OS as we've just released it, and a copy of, I think it's Raspbian Linux, and people will be able to just click an icon in their desktop and switch between the two. So you get to experience the best of both worlds. You get the compactness and the speed of RISC OS, and you get the rich applications and set of software that comes with Linux. I think after that, anything could happen. What we really want is to see loads of developers arriving on the platform. So people who are Linux developers traditionally, they've never heard of RISC OS, and they think, this is interesting, here's the source code, I can get at it for free, here's the operating system I can play with. It's really easy to build a new version of it, break things, reboot, try it again. It's nice and modular, so you can soft load bits of it at runtime without building a whole new release of RISC OS. And that would be great. I think once we've got developers, we've got potentially people building new applications, people porting loads of software from other operating systems like Linux. And that in turn will help feed the user community and give us all something new to play with, instead of playing with the same software that we've been playing with for years. On the other front, we've got other things that we've been working on, like the BeagleBoard ROMs and the IOMD ROMs for the emulator and for RISC PC and other legacy hardware. Those have all been moving along over the last few months, and we'll just continue working on those and improving them, adding polish. But for the most part, our attention has been focused on Raspberry Pi. I think once I've fixed the last few glitches we found in the current release, I'll probably switch off for a bit and go to sleep for a week. Other things that we've got going on, we've got our website has a lot of documentation in the form of a wiki, and one thing I've been acutely aware of in recent months is our website is quite technical and it's quite complicated and not particularly easy to navigate. I think what we really need to do is put some polish on it and get the views and opinions of people that use our website, but they're not developers, they just want to find out about RISC OS, get a copy and use it and just learn a bit more about it. So we've got some stuff going on in the forums at the moment where people are starting some discussions about how to do that and adding their comments. And everyone here is invited to join in with that. If you've got any thoughts at all about how we can improve the way we present RISC OS to the world at large, we would welcome your views. That's pretty much it, my waffle and spiel for today. Come and visit us on the stand and find out more about what we've got there. But these talks are nearly always about an opportunity for people to ask me questions, so feel free to ask away. This is a first. I can get out easy. Oh no, everything's gone.
36-bit support.
Yes.
Any sign that Adrian is going to...
There are hints. We had word from CJ earlier today that Adrian might be working on a Raspberry Pi port of Emulaw, and this is brilliant. He's done one recently for the BeagleBoard, for the OMAP boards, and for those of you who don't know, Emulaw is a piece of software which allows you to run legacy RISC OS software which otherwise wouldn't run on RISC OS 5. And Emulaw was, I think it was recently made freely available for things like the Ionics. And what we're hoping to see is, yes, that it comes to the Raspberry Pi. And that opens up a whole world of software that previously, you couldn't run, like Impression Publisher, for example. So hopefully...
He doesn't work for Texas first.
Right, well, I'll tell him that. I'll send him an email. Hopefully soon, but see, Chris Evans seems to think it's coming. Hi.
Any chance of RISC OS becoming preemptive multitasking?
Yes, no. Yes, if we did a lot of work, there are ways of doing it, but you end up in very philosophical debates about is the result RISC OS anymore? Because when you start looking at it from a technical perspective, you start thinking, well, actually, to do this, it'd be better to just get rid of this bit and rewrite that. And then to do that, you might as well get rid of the WIMP and write something that can do vector graphic windows and transparency and non-rectangular windows. And then you start thinking, well, actually, we'll just throw away the... And you end up with just this completely new operating system with a RISC OS emulator running on it.
RISC OS 2?
For legacy. But yes, I mean, it would be possible if you could devote the man-years of effort that it would take. Which sadly we can't. Everything on our website, which I've just nearly pointed to, that isn't there, we have our bounties page. So the idea of our bounty scheme was to create a load of pots that people could donate money into, and everyone can see what's in the pots. And each pot is assigned to a big piece of work which needs doing. And the hope was that that would stimulate people to develop these bits of code that are otherwise just too hard to do in your spare time. But I think what we really need is more people donating into those pots so that the amounts of money in the pots are sufficiently large that someone will look at it and go, yes, I'm willing to devote the next 28 weekends to writing this incredibly hard piece of code. Because at the moment I don't think 500 quid or something like that is enough to get people off their bums. But hopefully if we get an influx of new users and interested people, there might be an influx of money coming in as well from sponsors. Hi.
How much is enough?
How much is enough? Well, it's a good question. Different people have a different idea of what is their get off their bum amount of money. We've got a friend of ours, Rob Sprosen. His metric is he works out roughly on a spreadsheet how much time he thinks it's going to take. And then he says, what's the minimum wage for that amount of hours? And then I'll call it roughly that. And I'll say, you know, that's enough for me to justify getting up and doing some work. So I think that's how his approach to claiming bounties has been. Other people might be more commercially minded. They might come from a commercial software engineering background and they think, you know, I want £500 a day. And to which we would say, I'm sorry, but you're not going to get very much RISC OS development done.
How many bounties have been claimed?
2 so far. 2. One of them is the file system bounty, and the other one was the development platforms bounty. So we had one where we created 2. It was initially supposed to be 1 development platform. We'd buy a Beagle board, all the hardware, all the software, put it all together, and then we could loan it to developers. And in the end, we got so many donations to that we bought 2 complete development systems. And so one of them is on loan to someone, and the other one is handily ready to loan to someone whenever it's needed. That is considerably cheaper now that the Raspberry Pi has arrived. Since the Beagle board came along, people don't really need that anymore. They just buy a Raspberry Pi, and it's you know, it's pocket change almost. The other bounty was the file system bounty. So the file system improvements are crucial to RISC OS in the future, really. At the moment, it doesn't support partitions. It doesn't support very large drives or very large files. There's umpteen things wrong with file system support on RISC OS at the moment. But fixing them all is one of these huge jobs. I think we worked it out, it's about 2 man-years of work. So we divided it into logical chunks that we think you could do this chunk first, it's fairly straightforward and self-contained, and then there's the next one. And it ended up being 5 big lumps of work.
It's our approach to JavaScript.
Yeah, break it up into manageable chunks. So the first chunk was opened as a bounty, and that has been claimed. Someone is working on that now. So what I think I'll do is open the second bounty now and just start chucking money in. Because if people are still asking if they can donate to that, but for some reason I can't quite recall. We close the bounty once someone claims it, so we don't allow more donations into it. I think that might be to do with agreements that we've made with the people at the time. But I think I'll open the second stage of the file system bounties now and allow people to donate there. And that might encourage the guy to finish the first stage and move on to the second.
Would that be dependent on the first stage?
Yes. Yeah, they're all interlinked.
Do you have any idea what's happening with that first stage?
Yeah, it's starting to progress now. Basically, the guy who claimed it was helping us on the Raspberry Pi stuff, so he was quite distracted. But now he's got a lot more free time. He'll be starting to spend time on that.
Is it ever likely to be revealed who did it?
It's up to the developer that claims it. So we don't put any pressure on them. If they want to do it without acknowledging who they are, then that's fine. Hi.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, at the back.
Yeah, sorry. When somebody claims a bounty,
Yeah.
And it's available for everybody, who then maintains it? Does the person who claimed the bounty, does he maintain the software, or do you take it in-house and continue to maintain it?
Any software that's created under the bounty scheme will be donated back into the RISC OS source tree, so it will just become part of RISC OS.
Okay.
We're not supporting people developing software that they then license for their own purposes. If they license it open source, then that's fine with us as well, because we can fold it into RISC OS. but we're not putting any obligation on anyone for support. You know, the bounty there'll be a period while they're working on it where the bounty is closed, it's been claimed, and then after a while, either they release something to us and we can test it and say, yes, you've done it, or no, you've not. Or they'll come back to us and say, you know, I don't think I'm going to do it in time, in which case we'll probably just reopen the bounty and allow someone else to claim it.
Okay, thanks.
I was going to ask, that you've now got RISC OS on Raspberry Pi, you've got it on Revill, and some port page around on the Pandora box as well. There'll be a couple of demonstration units going on mobile type devices. So do you see that continuing, an expansion of type of devices, or a sort of plateau period where some further developments and additions to the core elements of the operating system are focused on now?
I think both. I think it just seems to be an ever-expanding list of hardware platforms available that we could potentially port to. And I think as we do that, we're reaching more people and potentially bringing more developers in. And these developers can either choose whether they're going to start porting to new platforms or working on the core of the operating system. There's always going to be a big list of things that need doing to RISC OS, and I think the more developers we can attract in, the more likely we are to see all those things done. But getting more platforms ported to is one way of opening up a route to new developers. So I think the two things are complementary and both need to happen.
Is it likely to see it on a tablet or a mobile phone?
If someone wants to do that, then yes.
It's very difficult to compare.
The difficulty is getting hold of the chipset documentation. So if the platform itself is built on a chipset where the documentation is readily available, then doing a port isn't that hard. If you can't get hold of the documentation, then doing a port can be prohibitively hard. I mean, we did ports back in the days of Acorn and Pace, where the basic stuff was up in a week, one person for a week, and then you added a bit of polish over the next few weeks, and then, you know, maybe a few more drivers took a bit more time, but the basic thing, within a month, you'd have, from having a platform sat in front of you and some data sheets, you'd have RISC OS up and running. But that takes a special type of person with a special skill set, and there's not many of those at the moment.
New users to RISC OS really need to direct them to a sort of forum where they're not going to be find up on the technical side that you display at the moment.
Exactly.
Website.
I agree. Yes. There are a load of welcome pages in the distro for the Raspberry Pi that I wrote, which are specifically aimed at new users. They're explaining everything, like how Windows work, and trying not to be too stupid, because I'm not assuming, you know, I assume everyone knows about how a desktop machine works. So I'm not going to, like the traditional RISC OS user guide, welcome guide, had a picture of a mouse, and this is a mouse, and this is how you press the button, and you hold it this way up. I'm not going to do that. But those pages serve as an introduction to pique the interest, and then they point back at the RISC OS Open site. But then you're met by this wall of technical waffle and a wiki full of PRMs and acronyms, and I think what we really need is, as you say, we need a portion of the website which is specifically for users and not full of techno-babble. And it's just helping introduce the topic of RISC OS and how to get more information, where to get the bits you actually want to get, how to update your system, and how to find out more. But I don't think we're that far away from that. I just think there's the front page of the website, and then some bits beyond it need polish. Any other questions? Hi.
If this starts to take off, are you going to consider taking on full-time staff?
Again, that depends on money coming in. We've never even paid ourselves so far, much to my annoyance. And the more times I'm sat there at 3 o'clock in the morning working on something, the more times I'm thinking, why aren't I paying myself? But then I look at the bank balance and I say, oh yeah, that's why I'm not paying myself. It's because we are funded by selling our wares at these shows. You know, this merchandise isn't there to pay anyone. It's just there to pay for the company to run and attend these events. There's just not enough, I don't think, coming in to allow us to pay anyone for more than a few weeks. So it's just not an option at the moment. One thing, I suppose, yeah, you could change that if we changed our structure and started being really commercially minded. But the problem with that is I don't think RISC OS as it stands is a big enough market for that. I don't think it can support it. We've got a few commercial vendors at the moment and they've got their niche and they're just about making enough money, but I suppose very few of them now is this their only source of income. I think we would have to be looking at non-RISC OS markets if we wanted to make enough money to be employees. And at that point you have to say, why is RISC OS Open doing that? I mean, we've got our day jobs, that's what we do anyway, so we just suffer with RISC OS. It's just, yeah, it's just our weekends and evenings. Trevor?
You donate your time for free. Ben mentioned that there's no one to do any sort of PR in amongst all the other time you spend doing things. How about the other members of RISC OS Open who run their own companies? Could they perhaps donate some of their company's PR resources to helping RISC OS Open?
I'm just thinking about that. I'm thinking the other people don't really have a company with a PR department either, so that doesn't help. The other people don't really pull their weight particularly. They're there as, you know, the silent investors that just, they took part in setting up the company in the first place and helped out with all of that part, and then really take a back seat from then on. And we're not that bothered about, because there's no money sloshing around, we're not that bothered about that. We're happy with their input when we ask for it. I think we are lacking in resource in all types of areas, really. I think Ben and I are now seriously considering bringing more people in to RISC OS Open. We've already got someone else who's not one of the original members, who's doing all of our sales, and he's dealing with all of the people buying stuff online and shipping stuff out. We've got someone else, Theo, who's at the show, who's helping a lot behind the scenes with all of the package management and all of that stuff. We just need more of the same, I think. It would be nice to have Jeffrey Lee as part of the team and just offload any piece of work onto him, because that's great. He just does everything. So we need more people, I think. That's true. But they'd all have to be volunteers.
So talking about that piece then, so we're all present at most of the shows that are in the RISC OS community, and I think you've been to have some other outside events. So, you know, notwithstanding lack of free time and everything else, is it something that you're probably looking at in the future? As you've got the platform with the Raspberry Pi to try and sell the story a little bit more in that sort of community?
Yeah, that would be brilliant.
Well, I can help with that, actually, because we will be making a big sort of PR fuss about it on my website as well. It's, we think it's really, really important for our platform. So you get each of our PR stuff as well.
Yeah, this is Liz. You'll probably hear from her later. But yeah, we'd be happy to go along if there's any events, Raspberry Pi. I mean, there's Raspberry jams all over the place. So far we haven't attended one directly because we're so busy on the other stuff.
So on that, there's a number of RISC OS clubs or communities.
Yeah.
And you know, in Midland User Group, we've run our own sort of internal Raspberry Pi jam as such.
Yeah.
You know, that may be an opportunity if we see that around the local community there's other Raspberry Pi sponsored events that are not part of our group that we could go up to and just say, oh, by the way, here's RISC OS for you. Let's help with that.
Yeah, we'd be happy to do more of those. I think now that we've calmed down and we're not spending all our time doing the software,
But I mean,
it would be brilliant to
yeah.
spread a message about RISC OS.
But I mean, the community can help itself by, the Bristol group, the Midland group,
Yeah.
the London group, going to some of those events and
Oh, yeah.
outside of our normal.
That's already happening. We've had people like Keith Dunlop, I think, has been doing stuff at Raspberry Jams.
That's the Bristol one.
Yeah. So people who are good, better than me at public talking, and people could go to these events and do that stuff on our behalf. We'd be happy to work with them and get a story straight and sort out a presentation, something like I've done today. But put some slideshow together or something, a demonstration even, and just tell everyone this is RISC OS. RISC OS, this is what it's good at, and this is why we love it. And this is why it's good on the Raspberry Pi. I think that would be brilliant.
Real time.
Yes.
I get beaten over the head a lot because my standard operating system for my platform is Linux.
Yep.
And it has lousy real time behavior.
Yeah.
How's your real time behavior? And it just feels like potentially it's a really big win that we now have a friendly operating system, non-RTOS operating system.
Yeah.
Real time.
Real-time performance is as good as all the software you've got running, because to a certain extent, RISC OS, because it allows anyone to disable interrupts, for example, you have guideline amounts for people who disable interrupts for as short a time as possible, but there might be some laggard on the system who brings the whole performance down. But if you
out of the box.
Yeah, I mean, if out of the box, if you built a fairly cut down RISC OS, I think you could really get a handle on its performance. I couldn't tell you offhand whether it's good. But I keep thinking we should build a really stripped down RISC OS, just a tiny ROM image with a few modules in it, and put a little shim on top of it, that maybe whatever the C library and basic, and a few instructions, and then embedded developers could just take that, put that little core nuggets on there.
Because we have nothing for that. We have nothing in that space at the moment. The USB may be an issue.
I don't know how much of that is user space though. So, well, yeah.
So we have people pointing. We have people pointing and saying, well, one of the reasons why I'm still using Arduino and it's the same for ARM is the Arduino has a very different real-time behavior system.
Yeah, but it's so much more puny.
Yes.
Yeah.
No. It is somewhere where we think will be good.
Well, I think RISC OS, it's so compact and knowable and modular, you can chuck away all the cruft that you're not interested in as an embedded developer, and you can get to know the ins and outs of every part of what remains, and you can have complete control. So at the very simplest level, you could just take the how and write your own little kernel to sit on top of it if you really wanted. I think there I think the FreeBSD people might be going to use RHAL to get it running on the Raspberry Pi, possibly.
I think they've got something running already that isn't using
Right.
it, but I don't know.
I think they did approach us a while ago,
Yeah,
but
they
that's
did. They were-
as much as I heard.
was talking.
But I mean, that remains an option for pretty much any OS, is it could use RHAL if it wanted. But yeah, I think RISC OS and a few other modules, the kernel and a few other modules, and you've got a basic platform there. And there's an RT support module, which Ben wrote. You can ask him more about it. And that uses the system mode in the processor to do real-time threading. So that might be interesting.
Got one more question.
Yes?
You're going to turn on all the multimedia goodness.
I'm sure we will turn
so
on.
much code this week.
I'm sure we'll turn that on at some point. We'll send Jeffrey an email and say, Jeffrey, can you make all this stuff work? And 24 hours later, he'll go, yeah, after me. Any other questions? Okay, well, feel free to come and see us at our stand if you've not already done so.